pase, pierna derecha, directo al arco, ¡golazo! ¡Golazo!
The world of football with a soccer perspective. This is Soccer Today with Duane, Rollins and Kevin Laramee, live on the Sports Podcasting Network.
Good day, good night, and welcome to Soccer Today for Friday, May 3rd, 2019. I'm Kevin Laramee, joined by Duane Rollins. As always, how you doing this Friday morning, Duane?
It's Friday. I'm excited. League One Ontario starts today, and if you didn't have a chance to listen to our Two Solitudes interview with Dino Rossi, our State of the League address there, it may be pumped up to get out and watch some local soccer tonight. I will be at North Mississauga to watch the North Mississauga team play. Right now, off the top of my head, I don't know who they're playing. But they're playing North Mississauga. It doesn't matter. It's League One Ontario. I'm going to watch the future, and that's what always gets my blood going strong. And then tomorrow, we got 3 Canadian Premier League games. My God, Kevin, everything is happening.
A lot of soccer. Yeah, local soccer. My first question, there's a North Mississauga? Okay, sure. Why not?
I'm sitting in it right now. Yeah. Actually, North Mississauga is Daniel Henry came out of that, so North Mississauga would be the and Katish Buchanan as well. Came out of the North Mississauga club. So look, these clubs you may not have heard of them, people outside this part of the world, but they produce some players, just like Sigma has.
Yeah, just like the small association, like in Laval, like the Delta. But this is not a Two Solitudes Soccer podcast. This is Soccer Today. We're Friday. We're going to talk about the news a little bit today. We haven't done this in a while. And then we're going to preview the weekend in Major League Soccer, a little bit of Canadian Premier League as well. But let's start with the big news this week, Duane. The Colorado Rapids have parted ways with Anthony Hudson after 9 games this season. They're still paying their former coach, Pablo, too. So here we go. Colorado got a new coach. And I guess with this firing, it's the GM now that's putting himself under pressure.
Yeah, I don't know if our listeners are old enough to remember the Benny Hill show and the theme song. That. When you're talking about the Colorado Rapids, I feel that you should have that looping in the background right now. And if you are too young to know what that reference is, it was basically, it refers to people that are clusters that don't know what the hell they're doing and are just like running around with their head cut off. That's the Colorado Rapids over the past few years. Look, he wrote his own ticket on the weekend when after they lose the game, he comes out to, a fair effort against Atlanta, too, to only lose by 1 against the defending champions, to, put aside how well Atlanta's doing this year. It's still a good effort to only lose by 1 when you're struggling as much as Colorado is. He goes out and then proceeds to say, how do you expect me to do anything with these bunch of losers? Basically is what he said. I'm paraphrasing. But, you can't say that and expect to have your job much longer. You clearly have lost the room. You clearly are going, screw this. Peace is what you're saying at that moment, right? And look, to put this in a little bit of perspective, the Colorado Rapids have played 9 games. They have 2 draws, have yet to win right now. Most of our listeners will remember the most infamous team that we still talk about from time to time on this show, the worst team in the world, TFC.
Danny Kuverman's 2013's TFC.
2012. It's 2012. But
2012? Okay, sorry.
Yeah, 2012 was the worst of the 2012-2013 mess. 2013 had Jonathan Rosario. That was his rookie season. That's how you distinguish the two. But it's a bit of a blur, those 2 years. Anyway, the worst team in the world, 2012 TFC, they had 0 points after 9 games, but they did actually win their 10th game. So after 10 games, the worst team in the world had 3 points. So if Colorado does not win this weekend, they will at the very best be tied with TFC 2012. And that is not somewhere anyone wants to go. Aaron Vinter was fired during that stretch. Obviously, Paul Mariner took over. And interesting, Paul Mariner had much the same approach. He looked at the media and said, what am I supposed to do with these guys? He famously yelled at the crowd one day when they were screaming at him to make a sub, and he looked at his players and said, which one would you put on? What would you have me do? Which can you bloody imagine being one of those subs at that moment? But nonetheless, that was a similar situation in Colorado. Look, there's part of we talked about it with Vancouver yesterday too when we were talking about the on the field stuff. There is a divide starting in MLS between the wants or the haves and the have-nots, the teams that can spend big. And Mark DeSantos yesterday, Kevin, came out and said something similar about how
it feels like he listened to our show yesterday because we literally talked about this. It's weird. Things are weird right now in the world.
In Vancouver especially, and that's getting uglier and uglier by the day. But Yeah, he came out and said that basically, well, we aren't going to get superstars, so we have to make do with what we want. He just took the approach of saying, I'm going to find a way, whereas in this case,
Yeah.
he'd given up. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's true, yeah.
Yeah, look, I wonder whether I believe that there will always be a way for these quote unquote smaller markets or less thriftier markets, I guess, to find their way, because Major League Soccer does have inherent parity things put in place, right? They have structures in place, processes in place to help these teams. So I think that will never allow for like a situation like you'd see in Spain or in England or in Germany, right? But I think there will be its own version of a separation happening. Something closer to Major League Baseball is going to happen, where there are teams in Major League Baseball. There's nothing really with the amount of revenue sharing that they do. There's nothing really preventing smaller market teams from doing it. But even a big market team like Toronto has to like sort of pick and choose when it tries to compete against the crazy bigs. And I think that's what's going to probably happen in Major League Soccer, that in any given year, you'll have a Houston out there going, okay, we found the right formula for this year. But to sustain that over a long period, it's going to be difficult.
I would be like, okay, this year the Galaxy, LAFC, and TFC are struggling. So this is our opportunity this year to squeeze into a high spot in the standings and then be able to compete. I think it's the same a bit ideology behind what you're saying. I'm just going to explain what you were saying because some of our fans are not baseball fan. If you're in the same division of the biggest club in the league, the Yankees and the Red Sox, if both are going to compete for a title that year, guess what? You're not. So it's that.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're two of the biggest sports franchises, sports products in the world. Like, forget Major League Baseball, right? And they have money that we can't even, like, they're top 10, top 20 richest, sports entities in the world, and you're trying to compete against that. So obviously, we're getting a little in the weeds here, but the scope when I'm talking about in Major League Soccer, you still have the same, because you have clubs in Major League Soccer that can outspend markets like Colorado 2-1, basically, in terms of the DP spending, in terms of their off the field stuff. So for them to compete, unless Major League Soccer swoops in and puts more parity controls in to try and pull down those best teams, and there's nothing that I've seen from Major League Soccer that indicates that that's where they're going with this. I think if anything, they're going to allow that separation to continue a little bit more. And as anyone who's listened to the show long enough knows, I'm perfectly fine with that, because I don't think we should dumb things down for the teams that aren't willing to spend.
No,
they should
yeah.
have consequence for what they're doing. There's no relegation in here, so at the very least, if you're if you don't make the playoffs 10 years in a row and you have no one in your stands, well, there's your relegation.
Well, it's your fault,
right?
Yeah. You relegated your fans to oblivion, or you relegated yourself to irrelevancy. But I think it's important to note that Connor Casey is taking over as manager for the Colorado Rapids. The Rapids did do a lot more spending in the offseason than usually. And not saying that they did a lot of spending. We're saying they did more spending than usually. And they had a bit more expectations in Colorado with the big trades they did in the offseason, and Anthony Hudson coming in. And unfortunately, it hasn't worked out. And like you were mentioning earlier, Duane, 9 games played, 2 draws, 7 defeats. But Connor Casey, former striker in Major League Soccer, he was with Philadelphia, of course, of one of the famous places he did play. I remember watching him in the beginning of the Impact in MLS in 2012, 2013. That's the end of the Connor Casey era. But now Connor Casey is manager of Colorado, and we'll see how he can influence this team, at least right their ship, and not make him drown in the Rapids, hopefully. But what does it say about Patrick Smith, the GM of the Colorado Rapids, who was willing to spend and invest a bit more with his players, still not having a coach that believes in the players, obviously, and affecting a big move 9 weeks in? We've talked about this before, Duane. There's a short window of opportunity when you want to fire a manager that is worthwhile enough to get the point that you think you can get in the rest of the season. Is 9 weeks in too late already off the top of your head?
I know from personal experience sitting in the crowd in Toronto in 2012, 9 games in was not too long to know that the season was dead. Now, there are other things to play for. I mean, Colorado has an open cup that they can play for. They can try and battle up a little bit. It's tough, though, because this is not a club that it's so hard when you get in this much of a hole when you're a Major League Soccer team. Now with 7 teams, I just have to look at the West standings. Kevin, to answer that truly well. But in terms of what I think they should do, I think they really need to take their time in making the hiring so that they get the right person in place for a long-term project. Because the biggest thing that, and we talked about this with Vancouver last year when it was clear that they were going to move on from Carl Robinson. We talked about this for many teams in the past. We talked about this with Montreal for sure before Rengard came in. You need to bring a guy in that you're going to trust to build something and let them build it. Because if you keep flipping things and you keep changing direction, that is just a recipe for continued failure.
So
Colorado's go ahead.
I was just going to say, so you're saying you have to give your manager the opportunity to fail and not having the pressure that if you fail, you lose your job automatically, to have the confidence to eventually build a successful team.
Yeah, I mean, especially if you're bringing them in a situation like this. As we've said before when we're talking about Atlanta, there is an argument to be made that if you've made the wrong choice, you need to cut bait quickly, right? And I'm not saying that they have made the wrong choice in Atlanta yet. I mean, it's possible, but
you're not saying hashtag the boar out. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, they're only 4 points out of a playoff spot right now. I think they'll probably figure that out, but. Again, I mean, we've talked about this already when we're talking about Atlanta, how there is an argument out there. There's a statistical argument out there that basically if you've made the wrong choice, it should be clear within 5-10 games, and then you just cut bait. But if you get past that point, or if you hire a guy in the middle of the season with a roster that is clearly demonstrated that it is not good enough, you have to give them enough time to be able to develop a team so that you can then truly evaluate them. So I would let Connor Casey take this team, whatever. I mean, this season, with all due respect to Colorado fans, and I appreciate I'm saying this on May the 3rd, it's a long time till next March, right? So it's a long time to wait. But
it's a long, no. But they're only 8 points out of a playoff spot. 8 points seems a lot, but it's May 3rd. We're still like 2 months away from the standings being important and from when you can actually look at things. It's not over at all for Colorado. You go on a run of 4 or 5 games, 2-3 wins, a few draws, and you have favorable results elsewhere in your conference, you find yourself in 7th position before you know it.
Yeah, only 21 points off the Shield. I mean, hey.
It's true. Anyway. Hey, statistics. Make him say whatever you want.
There you go. Look, I don't think anyone in Colorado... Here's what I'll say about this. There really, this is where the pro-rel people have a point. There really is no pressure the rest of the way. They can finish wooden spoon, and they're not going to build their fan base at all this year, but they're not anyway. So
is it going to matter at this point? Is it going to change anything? Colorado's Chicago 2.0 right now. Yeah,
and if the people that are showing up, I mean, just like the people that were at BMO Field in 2012, they're not going anywhere.
They're going to stay. That's what they do.
They are the people that they're going to yell at you. They're going to be really, really loud on social media. They're going to, threaten protests, and they're going to constantly threaten to leave. But they're there now. They're not going anywhere. So you're not going to lose them. You might as well get this right so that eventually, just like in 2012, 5 years later, you might be able to reward them.
Yep. All right. Speaking of not letting anybody speak, it's not necessarily the best way to put it, but the drama is continuing in Vancouver. Kira McCormack updated her blog yesterday with a just more in-depth timeline of 2007, 2008, and an in-depth more article. And there's been some reaction. The owners of the Whitecaps have put a press conference out, a press release out, and there's more comments being made, but there's pressure being put on journalists as well to either move on from the story, not to talk about it. So what can you tell us, Duane?
Yeah, there was a meeting with Jeff Kerfoot yesterday that was an invitation-only meeting, and several prominent people that have been reporting on this story in Vancouver were not only not invited, but were turned away when they tried to show up on their own. So it was a private meeting. That was their argument. And I mean, yes, strictly from a legal perspective, the Whitecaps as private business owners have the ability to do this. But from a ethical standpoint, from a do the right thing standpoint, this is just pure idiocy and completely terrible strategy. All that this does when you try and bury, the more you try and bury something, the more people are going to get their back up and try and dig it out, right? And if the Whitecaps want to get in front, well, they can't get in front of this. If the Whitecaps want to catch up to this at this point, what they need to do is they need to start being open. They need to start being transparent. And they need to say two really big words. Well, three.
Well, three. Yeah, because there's an apostrophe there. I'm sorry?
They need to say, I'm sorry. Yeah. They
we
need
are
to start
sorry.
with that.
Yeah.
And they haven't said that yet.
They haven't acknowledged anything yet. No. Okay, so this is going to sound a bit maybe too much, but corporations have rights of identity of individuals. So let's do a diagnosis of this individual. You know, when you are not aware of how you come off to other people, sometimes it's a symptom of a borderline personality disorder. And it's starting to look to me like the Whitecaps have a borderline personality disorder.
Yeah. Look, I mean, not to get political here, but in the world right now, there is a movement towards just bald-faced lying on either side of the spectrum, and they get away with it because they have bases that just will believe anything that they say. And again, I want to stress that I said both sides of the spectrum there. I'm not talking one politician over the other. There's obviously an obvious one out there, but there's others too on the other side. So it's not about partisanship here. This is different, though, and I think that this is ultimately where the Whitecaps are coming from. They're thinking, well, look at the rest of the world. If we just keep deny, eventually people will just move on, and eventually we will find our core audience, and they will believe us, and they will stick with us. I don't think Vancouver has a core audience right now. Who the hell is supporting the ownership there? I put a poll out asking if Bobby should be fired 2 days ago. There were more than 90% of the people said that he either should resign or be fired. Like that, one of the options was like he shouldn't even get the right to resign. He should just be canned, and that was the most popular one. But they also had one where he could, let him walk away, and we don't care. And that was the next, and it was like I said, 90% took the he must go approach. That's my feed, obviously. There are people in the stands that are probably unaware, and I'm sure there are people out there that say, well, they did nothing wrong because these women are lying, because there are idiots in this world that believe that anything that someone accuses their beloveds of has to be a lie. They have to be out to get money or something. It's ridiculous, but so we're not going to address them. But the average person out there, the average season ticket holder, many of who have families, who with children, who understand instinctively from that they would not want to have subjected their children to these type of abuses, whether it be the racism that the coach is accused of or the sexual misconduct, creepiness. Let's just call it creepiness for the general thing. Well, sexual misconduct is a better way to put it, but you can't argue with creepy. It was definitely creepy what he was doing. You wouldn't want that, right? And the Whitecaps have not done anything to address the Kira's accusations or the accusations of the women who came forward after with the more serious sexual stuff, and they have really buried their head, doubled down on this racism thing. I mean, that one to me, the racism, which is the most current one, like, Jesus, you have such an obvious answer to that. Just let the guy go. I mean, he was hired under false pretense, or you hired him incorrectly. Now, look, you get into a slippery slope here when you have these conversations. Are people not allowed to evolve? Are people not allowed to move on from past bad
to
behavior?
Change or to better themselves? Yes, I agree with what you're saying, Duane, but there's also the fact that when you're in a controversy like you are, everything is magnified. And when everyone's just waiting for a gesture of goodwill and they're not seeing it, they're going to want to see that gesture of goodwill, and you had a good opportunity there to show that gesture.
Yeah, and look, this is what I'll say about this as well. I do believe that this coach should be given the same opportunity as someone who robs a bank or someone who, kills someone is given. I mean, the scale is different in every case.
Oh, yeah.
But everyone is provided the opportunity to rehabilitate themselves, and this man should be provided that opportunity as well. But one of the keys, and you think about this from a criminal justice perspective, one of the keys to getting parole is owing up to your crimes and being forthright in your desire to change. And we haven't seen any of that from this particular gentleman or the Whitecaps
From the Whitecaps,
as a general.
That's why I was using the example of treating like a patient or like a one person, because the organization has shown us that it is not acknowledge or owning up to what happened in the past to be able to move forward, right? It's that closure that it's not happening.
No, exactly. They're just circling. This is a good guy. He's done good work. He's moved on. Okay, well, great. I mean, first off, you shouldn't have. I'm not saying they shouldn't have hired him. I'm not. I used to work in a jail when I was in my early 20s. I understand rehabilitation. I am empathetic to giving people a second chance. I am, even in something that appalls me on a personal level, like sexual misconduct or racism, even in those cases, I am willing to listen to someone who is truly trying to make changes and move forward, because, if you just isolate these people, then they're just going to, solidify their behavior and beliefs, right? So you can't just shut these people out. I believe that strongly on a personal level, but I don't see any remorse coming out of this organization. All I see is covering their ass and thinking only about, well, he's a good soccer coach, so what's it matter if he threw a banana at a black player once? He was joking. Bullshit.
Yeah, he was just joking. It's fine, Boys will be boys,
Yeah, no, and
no.
Look, it's 2019. We don't put up with this anymore. And yes, there are people out there that, even probably some of our listeners that think maybe that's too PC or too whatever. No, no, there are lines, right? There are lines that you just never cross, and that is one of them. And yes, he should be provided with the opportunity, but what they should have done, if that was the case, if he truly wanted to move on, they should have hired him. They should, off the top of the first thing they damn well should have said when they hired this guy is, this person was accused of this. This is what he is doing to fix this. This is why we're giving him a second chance. And they're going to get pushback on that, for sure. But if they do that, if any organization out there does that, this person was accused of racism in 2013. They've done this. They are truly sorry. This is how we're going to work with this. We appreciate that this might be triggering for some people, but we want to give this person a second chance. There will be zero tolerance to any operation of this or any incident of this moving forward. That's going to be controversial, but I am going to tell you right now that I would be okay with that if they came out in front of it and met it head on. But they're not. They didn't.
They didn't. And they didn't on all the controversies that are happening surrounding the Whitecaps now. And when there's an expression in French, I don't know if in English there's the equivalent, but the expression is faute avouée est à moitié pardonnée, which means a fault that is open and that you basically admit guilt of is a half forgiven already because you were forthcoming with it. And that's what we're missing. I think that's and when I say we, I don't include myself. I'm saying the fans, Kieran McCormack, the 14 corroborated stories, and of course everybody surrounding the Whitecaps now, from the players to the managers to the coaching staff to the presidents to the fans on the sideline to employees to everyone that loves soccer right now in Vancouver. We're just still waiting for that openness and that forthcoming to come. And when it does come, I think it will ease the healing process for different reasons.
Yeah. Look, there's no easy way out from where they are right now. There's no magic bullet here, folks. Like, and the Whitecaps, I don't know what they believe. It's hard to understand what they believe because they don't talk. They must just think they can wait this out. They must. I think they're treating the Kira stuff the same way they treated it at the time. They're dismissing it because it's, probably whether subconsciously or overtly, they believe that because it was the women's team and it was 10 years ago that it doesn't much matter and people are going to forget after the initial controversy blows over. But they're not. They're not. And the reason they're not is because the way the Whitecaps approached this and have treated it. It's just a bloody mess. And the longer this goes, the less likely that there's not going to be a major sacrifice at the top of that organization to try and at least stop the bleeding. And we were quite upfront about what we think that sacrifice needs to be. Well, it's Bobby. He's got to go, period.
Yeah, no, we'll keep an eye on the following stories, and hopefully nobody is censored, and that's another important aspect of journalism.
And I don't think we're ever getting a Whitecaps interview anytime soon. But
you know
fine.
what? I think the opposite, because they're gonna have to do damage control soon, and we'll see how things go. But let's move on now, and we'll continue to talk about the Whitecaps story. Of course, we'll keep an eye on all aspects of the Whitecaps story for sure. On Monday's show, Duane, we have one of our favorite guests coming on the show, and we'll talk about some rumors. And Omar Gonzalez, former LA Galaxy defender, U.S. men's national team, might be on his way back, and Toronto FC, top of the allocation order, might get the center back to reassure their defense. I guess the Laurent Simon experiment hasn't been a success so far.
It hasn't been a success when he does not have support beside him. I think Laurent Simon can still play a role with TFC in 2019 as a third center, as someone who comes in to
third in a rotation, third in the 3-man rotation center back line.
Yeah, I think that he still has a role there, and obviously, you might even put him on late in the game if you need a goal because of his ability on a free kick. So I do think that he's not a complete bust in terms of the signing, but I do not think that he is what Tim Bezbatchenko, who was his final signing as a TFC GM, thought he was going to be, and Gonzalez is the obvious. TFC has the top allocation spot. They're going to use it this year, so there is going to be a returning player or for a U.S. national team player come into this team. Unless they can't work a deal out, but that doesn't seem likely. They have the money and the room to do it. Gonzalez has been rumored to be coming back to Major League Soccer for a while. His time in Mexico has been mixed, to be clear, but I still think, when you look at how good the Mexican league is, Liga MX is compared to MLS. It still is about a 20% gap there. You bring him into an MLS situation, he's not young, but he's not old yet. This is a team in TFC that does believe that they're still the top points per game leader in the East right now. So they obviously think that they can contend. So this is a move for now, and it is a move that I think, while talking to a couple people yesterday after Paul reported it, they all sort of backed up what he said and suggested that this will come very close. It's going to be close to the wire, but it probably can happen before the summer. And if it doesn't happen before the summer, then it will almost certainly happen in the summer because he can come on a free at that point.
Yep.
So right now,
I was going to say we're going to have Paul on the show Monday to talk about this rumor for now, Paul Tenorio of The Athletic. And just before we quickly take a look at the games this weekend and what we're exciting for, Omar Gonzalez with TFC got us thinking, who does Montreal need? Who does Vancouver need in the window that opens just in the end of the month?
Vancouver needs a scorer, clearly.
Vancouver needs half a team. No, the scorer.
They need 9. Montero's not working out, so
he's got one shot on target in 2019. That is probably the most impressive, negative impressive stat this year. One shot on target for Freddie Montero. Your DP.
Freddie Montero's bizarre.
Freddie Montero hasn't been good since 2013. Did I say that out loud?
He had an okay season for the Whitecaps 2 years ago. It's just hard. I think it's hard for any of us who've been covering this league for a while to grasp with our own mortality.
Mortality?
That's what I'm trying to say. Jesus, it must be Friday. Mortality, because I still think of Freddie Montero as a kid. He broke in 2009. That's a decade ago.
He was 19 or something.
Jesus. Anyway, but you're right. He has not been an impact player at the level that the Whitecaps need him to be since that point. But he was an inexpensive option for them. And look, Mark DeSantos has to work his contacts and find some value there. And that's kind of what he was saying yesterday when he was talking to reporters in Vancouver about the on the field stuff. Is that they have to be creative. And he's shown in the past that he can be creative. But this is
This is a higher level he's ever coached, though. I'm just playing devil's advocate here. It's one thing to create magic in the NASL and the USL where one player that is really above everybody else is findable, won't cost you an arm and a leg, and will be above everybody else in the league. in Major League Soccer, to do this, it will cost you an arm and a leg, and it won't be that easy. And it's going to be for a team that does not necessarily invest millions of dollars on one player. It's really going to take more than magic. I think Mark Dos Santos is going to have to work his miracles. We're just coming off of Easter season. Miracle is needed in Vancouver.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to give you a Football Manager analogy here. Anyone who's played Football Manager at the lower leagues will know that you can build a team up very quickly to get to, if you're in the Conference North, say in England, you can get the team into the League Two pretty quickly just by focusing on like a very specific athletic trait. You can go, I'm going to get a whole bunch of fast players, or I'm going to get a whole bunch of strong defensive players that can head the ball, and I'm going to play a style that suits that. And you can kind of go through those lower levels by focusing on those very narrow traits. But once you get into the higher levels, you can't do that anymore. You have to find players that are better across the board. And that's kind of what I think, when you look at the lower levels in North America, not in a video game thing, but that's what you can do. You can focus on athleticism or on, passing or something, and just find players that have fallen through the cracks, that are very good at one thing, and make them work at a lower level. And that's what Dos Santos has done very well. And he's figured out ways to coach around that. One of his greatest strengths has been adjusting his tactics to the players that he has. And I think that's what he does exactly. He's a lower league manager on Football Manager. He figures out,
True.
oh, look, I have a lot of fast players, so I'm going to build a tactic that works with fast players, right?
Yeah.
And when you get to MLS, you got to have tactics that work against fast players and slow players and big players and strong players. And when you get to, La Liga, you have to have even more of that. But, right, it's all scale. But he's a smart guy. I think he'll figure out how to make it work. But whether he can figure out to make it work for a championship,
well, not this year.
Matters.
I'm going to say it. I'm going to call it. Not in 2019, hopefully. Yeah. But 6 points for the Whitecaps, and we'll see how it goes. But for Montreal, to quickly finish on the needs of the Canadian team in Major League Soccer, I do feel Montreal needs a striker still. Still just a question of, Montreal needs another game breaker. It's been a while since Montreal made a transfer or an acquisition that turned out the way it was supposed to. Since Nacho Piatti, maybe Samuel Piette and Tyler are the transfers or acquisition that really panned out. Of course, Bakary Sagna has been playing well too, but what I mean is, you have to look for the future too. Piatti's contract is supposed to be over after this year, so you're looking at your situation, the post-Piatti era in Montreal, and you'll need another game breaker. And you need a striker too. So I think Montreal, to set themselves for success not just this year, but in the coming years, if you're able to get a striker and an attacking midfielder, hopefully a 10, but if not, you get a left attacking midfielder and you still find a way to make him work in the post-Piatti era. I think those are the big needs in Montreal. And with those two needs being addressed, Montreal can win it all this year. That's how strongly I believe about their beginning of the season.
Certainly, I think that when you look at the East is open. As I said a minute ago, Toronto has the most points per game in the East right now, which I think will surprise a lot of people that aren't really paying attention, because they'll look at Toronto and see the flaws, right? Well, that tells you all you need to know about the East. Every team has flaws. So if you can figure your flaws out the best in this closed season, then you have a chance to get to the MLS Cup final. And if you get to the MLS Cup final, might as well win the damn thing, right? Seattle did.
Yeah. Toronto
did. Seattle did without getting a shot on goal. Yeah. So,
so Montero has more shots on net than Seattle did in the MLS Cup final in 2016. Yeah, but yeah.
Yeah, so, right. There's a chance in the East right now. So it's wide open. You got to move quick though, because the teams with money are going to make TFC. We're talking about they're going to talk about a major player coming in. Also, Jansen might be coming back. Looks like it's happening. So yeah,
Falcao might be joining NYCFC this summer. So that will be fun to see Falcao on a small pitch. Yeah, that could be interesting. Let's take a quick look before we say goodbye for this week to the games today, tomorrow, and Sunday in Major League Soccer. Colorado, Vancouver tonight. So who's Who wants to be last in the Western Conference tonight, 9 p.m., Colorado, Vancouver?
It's the immovable object versus the immovable object or something. I don't know.
The irresistible force meeting the irresistible force tonight.
Yeah. The resistible force meeting the resistible force.
Yeah, exactly. It's one black hole meeting a black hole. What's going to happen? They're both going to fall into it. New York Red Bulls versus the LA Galaxy tomorrow. Orlando TFC, Houston FC Dallas, Montreal NYCFC, Philly, New England, DC Columbus, Minnesota versus Seattle. That's an interesting one. Real Salt Lake Portland, San Jose FC Cincinnati, LAFC Chicago, and the last game this week, Sunday, Sporting Kansas City versus the defending champion Atlanta. And quickly in the Canadian Premier League, yes, it has begun. May 4th, Saturday, the HFX Wanderers open Wanderers Ground versus Forge FC tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern Time on the CBC. Cavalry FC 3:30 p.m. their home opener at Spruce Meadows versus York 9, and Valor FC their home opener at Investor Group Field versus FC Edmonton. Those are your games this weekend. What are you excited for, Duane?
Obviously, I think watching both Calgary and Edmonton, so that we've seen all 7 teams, and you can start to really have conversations about overall strength. It's been interesting to watch the Canadian Premier League launch over the last week, and to be honest, it's taken a lot of my MLS attention away. It'll even itself out over the course of the year because I do still love MLS and plan to follow it the way I do. But this is new. It's like, it's like a new girlfriend. You're going to spend a lot of time with them, and
sure.
Your poor cat's not going to get as much.
I was going to say,
for a couple days.
It's like your new toy. It is all brand new and shiny, and everything's working on it. You're still gonna play with your old toy that was your last favorite toy. You're still gonna play with it in a few weeks, but for a couple of weeks, you're just gonna try to figure out this new one.
Precisely. In terms of what I'm most looking forward to this week, to continuing that theme, though, the game that I am most looking forward to is Calgary versus York, because I do think that just like York versus Hamilton last week, if you look at my top 3 picks in the league, that those 3 are in order. Well, I had Calgary, Hamilton, York were my picks, so I believe that's another great matchup there. So, and I'm looking forward to seeing, as a former Maritime resident, I always have to be careful. You can't call yourself a former Maritimer unless you can trace your roots back 17 generations there. But as a former Maritime resident, I am looking forward to see the Maritimes get in. The East wanted in, and now they're in. That's what I'm saying.
Tomorrow is National Donair Day. I don't know if it is for real, but it is for me. And I'm going to watch.
It's just a falafel, isn't it? It's just a falafel with different sauce.
It's not falafel. Falafel is vegetarian. And there's one thing that the Donair is not. It's not vegetarian.
Right.
But
it's a shawarma. It's a shawarma with
it's similar. But the thing is, here's a Donair 101 for you. It was invented by a Turkish fella who ended in the Maritimes in Halifax, on the outskirts, and he was Turkish from his descending, and he had doner meat, and doner is served with like a garlic sauce similar to shawarma. Every country has meat that is served on some sort of bread. If you're in Philly, it's a steak sandwich. If you're in Montreal, it's a smoked meat. Well, if you're in Halifax or in Nova Scotia, it's a doner, which is a doner meat, the Turkish meat, that is served on a kind of like a pita bread, served on a pita, but with the sweet sauce of condensed milk, and then you add cheese and garlic, and it's delicious, especially when you had a bit too much to drink.
Yeah, I'll stick to my falafels up at St. Clair and Dundas, or Dufferin and St. Clair, best falafel in Toronto. Anyway, that's a Turkish falafel too, so there you go.
Oh yeah, and there you go. So we'll keep an eye on the games this weekend, and we'll be back Monday to give you our thoughts on what happened this weekend. And also on Monday's show, Paul Tenorio of the Athletic Soccer to talk about Omar Gonzalez, U.S. men's national team, and Major League Soccer. But until then, make sure you follow Duane at 24th Minute, myself at Kev Laramee, and this show at Soccer Today SPN. If you like what we do, and if you like Canadian soccer as well, and you want to contribute to what we do to keep us independent and keep us covering the Canadian Premier League and Major League Soccer, go to patreon.com/sports podcasting network. Your donations go a long way. The revamped Patreon page, I spent a better part of yesterday to revamp, give it a new look with a new tagline. So make sure you go see our Patreon page at patreon.com/sports podcasting network. And as always, until Monday, have a great soccer.
You can find the podcast version of all the shows we do on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Google Play Store, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you get your podcast.